Good morning! I'm the Shield Maiden and welcome to my kitchen. So today we're going to make something that was a staple food during the Viking Age, and that is skyr. And some of you may have heard of it. At least where I am in the United States, it's become more and more popular in recent years, and you can actually find it in the grocery store where you didn't used to be, not all that long ago. But it is a yogurt, effectively, or that's the sort of closest thing that it resembles. And oftentimes, with the thickness of it, at least as you'll see the thickness of it that I make, it really kind of more resembles a Greek yogurt than your kind of traditional standard sort of average, at least in America, style of yogurt. It's really good for you. It's a fermented food. And so we know now there's plenty of studies backing this up that it's very, very good for gut health. And I don't add any sugar of any kind to this either. And so it's much more healthy for you from that standpoint than just kind of an average yogurt, especially a flavored yogurt, which would be, oftentimes artificially flavored as well. So we know this was a staple food in the Viking Age. We have saga evidence of it, and there's some evidence about housing and the vats and stuff that it was stored in. It's something that they could have eaten all year long, and they had the ability to keep it cool, especially in Scandinavia, where it's cold for 6 months out of the year at least. And so we know that they were hunting and fishing, of course, but we know also that Scandinavians during the Viking Age were definitely pastoral farmers. And so they did have domesticated animals that were their primary source of food. And of course, the milk that came from them, primarily from cattle, beef, and goats. And so it's a dairy product that is, if you're not dairy tolerant, probably not the best thing for you. But if you can eat dairy, then I highly, highly recommend this. I eat this almost every day. And the batch I'm going to make, you'll see probably, well, at least me and my husband, it's just the two of us here. He doesn't eat it as often as I do, but this batch lasts me probably around 2 weeks or so. And it starts with just a simple gallon of milk. And so here, let's look at some of the ingredients right here. It's very, very quick and easy to put together. So we've got 1 gallon of whole milk. I use organic whole milk, but you can actually use whatever kind of milk you like. For instance, 2%, etc. I like the creaminess of the extra fat, and I think it's actually good for you. So, and then also you'll need some kind of whisk and a measuring cup, and then some kind of thermometer. So, and I'm using kind of just a standard floating thermometer that would be used for making things like, candy, etc. But it's pretty easy to find in any store that sells cooking supplies. And then also, if it's your very first time of making this, then you use some yogurt as a starter, or sorry, some skyr as a starter. And so I've got here Siggi's brand. But you don't have to use this particular brand, but just a standard kind of sort of roughly 5-ounce cup of this size is what you'll need. There's another brand called Icelandic Provisions that I've used that works well. Also, if you have a Trader Joe's in your area, if you're in the US, they have their own store brand of Icelandic Skyr, and that works well also, and it's roughly the same size of container. So just get yourself some skyr from the grocery store, and then you'll only need to use that the first time because then once you've made a batch, you can then hold out a similar size, 5 ounces or so of your own prepared skyr then to use as the starter for your next batch as you move forward. And then also I use animal rennet here. And this is something that I easily just bought on Amazon. I bought it a while ago. I don't even remember how much it cost. It's not that expensive, but it lasts a very long time because you only use a few drops each time you make the skyr. You can also, if you want to try a different form of rennet, there is vegetable rennet as well. And so you can certainly source that on places like Amazon also. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And so the next thing we need to do is go ahead and put some milk in a pan and begin to heat it up. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is just heat up the milk. So I have poured it into a big pan, as you can see here. So the entire gallon is in there, and floated my little thermometer in there. And also I'm using the whisk to stir it occasionally because As you may know, if you cook milk, and especially if you cook it too quickly, you're going to scald it on the bottom and it'll start to stick to the bottom of the pan. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So I kind of whisk it every now and then just to keep that from happening. But basically do a slow bringing up of the heat. So don't like put it on full boil on your heat setting, just maybe just a little bit below that so that you can raise the heat, probably say within about 10 to 15 minutes up to 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And then when you get to that point, you turn off the heat and remove the pan from the heat. And then we'll take a look at what the next step is after that. So while the milk is beginning to cook, I wanted to show you some of the other equipment that you're going to need, because this is a dairy product that needs to have the whey, or the liquid, separated from the curd, and that will take place over a few hours. And so you're going to need some way to drain it as far as a strainer goes, and also some cheesecloth in order to help in that process. And so I have kind of a funky little setup here, but it works for me. And so I would encourage you to do the same thing. Just sort of see what you've got and see how it works each time that you make it, and then kind of adapt as necessary. But this, you're going to need, something that's going to fit the whole, gallon of milk. And so I found that this shape of strainer that I got, basically, I think it's IKEA for, a pretty IKEA cheap price. But this is what it looks like. And it also has these nice little arms here, so you can suspend it over the sink if you need to do that when some of the drainage is happening. But you'll need some cheesecloth, and that's the brand that I use, just something very available in my local grocery store. And I also like the fact that it's certified organic and it's also unbleached. I think that's important for not having, bleach or chlorine or whatever they use in bleach to get into your food. So a sheet of the cheesecloth that will fit over the strainer, and then that's what you'll put the skyr in. And then the four little cups that are at the bottom there, this is my kind of, sort of jury-rigged little kind of setup here, because I need to get the strainer lifted up off the bottom of that glass pan, so that it's not sitting, the milk is not sitting in its own whey, or the skyr after it begins to separate. And so this is my method for doing that. But so whatever way you can come up with to kind of suspend the strainer and the cheesecloth setup so that you get good drainage, and the skyr that you're making as it thickens is not just sort of sitting there in its own whey. And so this is something that we will do after we get the milk heated up and it already gets set up a little bit, which I'll show you here in a moment. But this is the setup that I use for putting this in the refrigerator overnight. My milk has heated to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, and I have now removed it from the burner where I was heating it to a cool burner so that it can sit for a while and begin to reduce that temperature. And so I have an electric induction cooktop, and the highest setting for the burner that I used was 9, which would bring something to a boil. I put it on setting 8. So again, just below the highest heat so that it's not coming to a rapid boil quickly, but it's raising the heat. And that took me, again, 15 minutes. So 190, and now it's moved to a cold burner, and it's going to sit there for about an hour and 15 minutes. That's how long it takes to reduce the temperature to the needed mark, which is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is actually something that you do want to watch pretty closely. I set a timer for 75 minutes and then check to make sure. And depending on the ambient, temperature of my room, etc., it's usually roughly around that mark where it gets down to 110. And then that's where you can begin the next step of mixing in your skyr and your rennet. But you will want to make sure, because I've tried it before where I have not done it at 110 degrees because I got distracted or something, and it definitely changed the outcome of the skyr. So this is kind of an exact science when it comes to just making sure the temperature is correct for the next step. So I'm going to let this just sit here, and it does sit there just open like that, uncovered at all, cooling. And then after it gets down to 110, we will look at the next step. Our milk is still cooling in the pot, And we've got maybe about 5 minutes left before it reaches the desired temperature of 110 degrees. And so it's at this point that I begin to prepare the other things that will need to be mixed into the milk that will begin the fermentation process. And it's very simple. All I've done is put in that glass cup there 1/4 cup of warm water. And so this is water just out of my tap on the hot setting. You'll have water that is, roughly 100 or so degrees, so that it's very similar to what the temperature of the milk is. And into that water, just plain water, I have dropped the rennet, liquid rennet, 7 drops. And this is something that you can kind of play around with depending on the consistency you like. But that's the number of drops that I have found over the many years that I've been doing this that actually achieves what I'm looking for. So 7 drops of rennet in 1/4 cup of warm water, about 100 degrees. And then I have taken my cup of Siggi's Skyr and put it into the glass container here, as you'll see. And I have also scooped about 1 cup of the warm milk from the pan into this glass dish so that I can mix it up with the yogurt. And so I'm going to do that right now. And then that way it has a little bit of time to get tempered to the temperature of the milk that I'm going to mix it into. And then I've also prepared just a towel. So just get any kind of thick towel that you have that we will need to put over the milk when it's in its resting position for several hours. So this is all you need to do to get ready. And then now we just will check the milk to make sure we have achieved our 110 degrees. All right, ready? Here we go. The milk is at 110 degrees. So now we're going to take the plain tap water that's about 100 degrees, into which I mixed the 7 drops of the liquid rennet, and just pour that right in. And then also we'll take the mixture of the 1 container of Siggi's Skyr. And again, you don't have to use Siggi's, you can use any type of skyr, but just 1 container, roughly about 5 ounces. Mix it in with about a cup of the milk from the pan so that it can temper and get to the proper heat. And then that just simply gets mixed in as well. Kind of stir that up with the whisk a little bit. Get that all nicely incorporated. And then take your thick towel, cover that, make sure your towel doesn't dip into the milk. And I put these little bag clips on my handles just to make sure, tighten the towel and then clip it down so that it's not going to drape over time and get stuck in there. And so that's all we need to do. Then we're going to let this sit for several hours. So this is why I usually start it in the morning, say maybe around 9 a.m., which is what it is now. And then I will let it sit until probably 4 or 5 p.m. And then we'll take a look. And if everything has worked out okay, fingers crossed, it should be beginning to set up and not be in liquid form anymore. So we'll check back and see you then. We started our process at about 9 o'clock this morning when we put everything together in the pan and then covered it with the towel. So it's been sitting there for a while. It is now 4 p.m. So we've got about 7 hours. And what you're going to be looking for is a little bit of separation of curd from whey. You can see the sort of yellowy bit there, that is the whey. And when you jiggle the pan, that's what you want, a nice jiggle so that it has started to firm up, kind of like Jell-O, actually, quite frankly. And so this is the time now where I take the entire pan uncovered and I put it in the refrigerator and then I leave it there overnight. And so then tomorrow morning we will continue on to the next step, which is to put it in the strainer. Okay, it is now 7 a.m. the next day, and this has been sitting in the refrigerator since 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And you might remember just before I put it in, I could shake the pan and get a pretty good jiggle that looked kind of like Jell-O. But now when I do that, it's definitely firmer. You can feel it. You can actually see it even though you can see again sort of the little yellow spot there in the middle where the whey is begun to separate. And so now basically what I'm going to do is I've got my setup here. that I introduced yesterday with my pan and my cheesecloth over my strainer, my little clips on there to keep the cloth from falling in. So again, just kind of work that out however you can in order to get a setup so that your strainer is up above, whatever the whey is going to strain into, so that it doesn't continue to get, sort of soaked with it on the bottom side. And then I just basically take this out, and you can see, look at that nice giant chunk of this. And again, so it's like, this is a yogurt type of product, but it's also something that is much more akin to like Greek yogurt as far as thickness goes. And so I will continue putting this into the strainer, and then I will pop it back into the refrigerator, where it will remain for another couple of hours, letting the whey seep out. But you can already see also here the whey that is separating there, and that is just fine, not a problem. So put this in here, and I'll pop it back in the refrigerator, and we'll take a look after a couple of hours. Okay, so the skyr has now been in the strainer for 3 hours, and look at what we have. You see all of that liquid whey that ended up in the bottom of the pan. It's about an inch. So it strains out in a fairly short amount of time. And so this is why you want to have it also suspended enough up above, so that you don't have your skyr that's in the cheesecloth then sitting in that whey, because the whole purpose obviously is to separate the curd from the whey. And so now at this point, what I'll do is I will take it and drain some of that off very carefully. And I actually like to let it sit for just a little bit longer, but I'm a person who tends to like my skyr on the fairly thick side. At this point, you could actually just begin to take it and take it out of the strainer. I hear that. And so you've got, a pretty thick yogurt kind of consistency there. And again, like Greek yogurt primarily. And so if you want to do that, then go ahead and do it and put it into an airtight container. I have my airtight container over here ready to go for when I put it in. But again, I'm going to let it sit for a little bit longer. And then it will keep, again, like for probably a couple of weeks. So this is, depending on how many people are in your household and who eats it. But all of that for, the $6 that I paid for a gallon of milk, and the money that I spent a long time ago on that rennet, and then that 1 carton of skyr to get everything started. And then remember, as you start to eat on this and you get sort of down to the end of it, to save out about probably, 3/4 of a cup or so, half a cup, so that you can use it as the starter for your next batch, rather than having to buy another small little Siggi's or other skyr from the store to use as a starter. So I got busy and ended up leaving this in the refrigerator to continue to drain for about an additional 5 to 6 hours from the one that I previously showed you. And so you'll see there's just about another 1/2 inch or so that has drained out. And you'll find that the initial phase of drainage that I did this morning, where it only lasted for 2 or 3 hours, but you got at least a good inch of whey off of there, that's always what's going to happen. You're going to get more initially. And so I mentioned before also that I like mine thick, and so this is just fine with me. And with this kind of fermented project or process, it certainly doesn't hurt it to sit and let additional whey drain out. And so now I'm going to basically remove most of all of this. And again, you'll see it has become quite thick now, almost even starts to look kind of like cream cheese a bit. And I'm going to put that into my container for storage. Okay, here we go. We've got our finished product all done. And so that's just, a little over 24 hours, but this will last a couple of weeks in my refrigerator. And as it sits in this airtight container in my refrigerator, as you will find out as well, it continues to separate the whey from the curd. And if you don't want it to thicken up anymore, then simply just take a whisk or a spoon and mix in any of the whey that has accumulated before you eat it. Or if, like me, you like it super thick, you can just continue to pour off the excess whey as it accumulates. Now, I I actually tend to pour it out, and I probably shouldn't because whey has a lot of uses. So if you just Google what to do with excess liquid whey, you'll find that there are cooking applications, there are preserving applications. We actually know the Vikings did use liquid whey in order to preserve meat, for instance. But there's also other cosmetic or skincare types of applications as well. So it's actually really a healthy thing. Some people even just drink it because it's got good probiotic qualities to it, as does the whey, or sorry, the actual skyr that it comes from. So if you're interested in any of that, like I said, just Google what to do with liquid whey and you'll find out that there's lots of options out there. So, all right, I hope you enjoy this. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them. And till next time, keep eating like a Viking. Thanks. Sjálfst.